Okay, so they're the auxiliary verbs. What about main verbs? Well, main verbs come after these auxiliary verbs, which form tenses, questions, negatives and passives. And main verbs can be separated into a lot of different types. Firstly, you have stative verbs and dynamic verbs, and performatives are a type of stative verb, I would argue. Yeah, performatives you will learn about on this course. They're verbs which you perform when you say them. For example, I promise. Yeah, you don't say I am promising, even though you're doing it right then. You know, you say I promise, and when you perform the verb when you say it, well, then they become stative verbs. And these stative verbs are never used in continuous tenses. They can be used as gerunds and participles, and this is important. You know, you can't say I am knowing because know is a stative verb. You can't say I have been knowing because know is a stative verb. You can't say I will be knowing because know is a stative verb. But what you can say is knowing the right answer, comma, I put my hand up. And that would be a participle phrase, knowing the right answer, and then a comma because that's an incomplete thought, and then the main clause, I put my hand up. And notice that the main clause has a finite verb, put, with a doer, I, and a tense, past tense, yeah, knowing the right answer, I put my hand up. It's in past tense. Put is tricky because it's put, so you can't see the tense very easily. But it still has a tense, it's in past tense. Knowing the answer, I put my hand up. Okay? So, please be aware that these stative verbs, you can't use them in continuous tenses, but yes, you can use them as participles and gerunds, certainly. They certainly can be used in the ing form, but in the non-finite ing form and not in the finite ing form. Not I am knowing, not I was knowing, not I will be knowing, okay? So I hope that's clear, because these points are very subtle and quite often people miss them and then they make mistakes. So dynamic verbs are just not stative verbs, they're everything else. And you know, there are more dynamic verbs, it seems to me, than stative verbs, but there are a lot of stative verbs, and if you learn about them right from the beginning when you're doing English tenses, it makes it much easier to form correct sentences. It really does. So we learn about stative verbs right at the start of this course, and I did it at the start of the Master Advanced Grammar course as well, because it's so important. Okay, so we can split main verbs up into stative and dynamic. We can also split main verbs up into copular verb and ordinary verb, and they are different, and it is important. Copular verbs are verbs like be, become, feel, get, yeah, feel, get. Now, what's strange about these linking verbs is that, firstly, we call the thing that comes after a linking verb, we don't call it an object, like with an ordinary verb, we call it a subject complement. So why do we give it this different name? Well, it's because when you say I kicked the president, kick is an ordinary verb, let's make that clear. When you say I kicked the president, or I punched the president, or I spat on the president, yeah, when you use an ordinary verb like that, kick or punch, notice that you are doing something to something else. But when you say I became president, yeah, when you say that, I became president, or I am president, can you see that you're describing yourself? You're not doing something to someone else. You are using the verb to say this is a quality of me. Yeah, I became president, or, you know, and this is even true with not just nouns like president. I think it's a bit clearer with nouns though. It's even true with adjectives. You know, the other thing which makes these verbs different is that you can use an adjective, and you must, in fact, you must use an adjective after these copular verbs because you're describing yourself. When you say I became angry, well, you're just describing the subject.